CNN sucks, and so do all. So, I mean, let's not, let's just cut right to the chase. And most of the mainstream media news organizations are just, they're just run by billionaires, and they're just spoon feeding you a cacophony of warmongering narratives about how Biden is awful. This is a disaster. We should absolutely, maybe we should still be in Afghanistan. This is Biden's mess. His approval rating is going down. Meanwhile, I like to think that when all of the media is telling you a big bowl of lies like that maybe Biden has actually done the right thing. And I have been a staunch supporter of him during this. He did the hard thing and got out of Afghanistan, a 20-year war that was unwinnable from the beginning. Who we should be talking about in all of this is George W. Bush and his merry band of warmongers who got us into this mess in the first place. And Obama, who didn't get us out, who was worried about his appearance on television and not getting us out of Afghanistan. And Trump, who actually set in motion the move to get us out of Afghanistan, but didn't actually follow through with it. And now is pretending like this plan that we're seeing unfolding before our eyes wasn't his, as if this was Biden's plan. But Biden actually executed on it and got us out of there. But CNN can't handle it, and the mainstream media can't handle it. Because every segment you see in the newspaper, online, on CNN, on Fox, on MSNBC is about what a disaster this is and how the warmongers, they want us back in there. Let's bring in retired General blah, blah, blah to get his perspective on this, who's on our payroll now here at CNN. So CNN had the audacity this weekend to do a segment about how the media has been handling Afghanistan. So during an appearance on CNN, former White House advisor Matthew Dowd and columnist Amanya Marcotti criticized the media coverage of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan as being over the top. And the coverage, and they talk about the coverage being way over the top. Just watch this interaction on CNN. It was actually a really remarkable moment. And I can't believe that they actually did this segment. And it was like critique right in their face. Watch.
So, Matthew Dowd, you would describe the media's coverage this week as what?
Way over the top and unconnected to a perspective on the issue from the beginning. They've added more perspective in the final days, but from the beginning they didn't have a perspective on it. My sense of this is Joe Biden has done. We should judge it by the data of what's happened and not by anecdotes. And sometimes the press has a tendency to judge things by anecdotes and not the data. And the data for the last week shows Joe Biden has basically gotten 30,000 people out of Afghanistan without a single loss of an American life.
So how do we challenge that? Well, that goes against my narrative here at CNN. At CNN, we make our money off of war. Right? We've got we have a whole show called The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer, which is a mock-up of the idea of being in a war situation room, right? Welcome to The Situation Room. Our top story today. We go to Kabul, which is like the fall of Saigon. War. Remember the first Iraq war? And that's the thing that put CNN really on the map.
I'm sure Brian, after the show, he's going to the back room or whatever, and he's like, is anybody vetting my guests anymore? Are you guys vetting these people?
You're cracking me up.
Exactly, Brian. So he says the coverage was way over the top, Matthew Dowd says, and unconnected to a perspective on the issue from the beginning. They've added more perspective in the final days, but from the beginning, they didn't have perspective on it. So ending a war. Well, what does Brian think about this? He's like, I don't believe you. I know who butters my bread here at CNN. Let me see if I go along with that. I don't know if I go along with that kind of coverage.
Amanda, what's your critique of the coverage?
I agree. It's been over the top. I think that...
Wait a minute. 2 guests on my show that think that CNN's coverage and all has all been over the top? What's going on here?
We were reminded of the factors that got us into some of the wars and to begin with, which is there tends to be a bias in the press towards military intervention.
Did you hear that? A really astute thing that she just said. There tends to be bias in the media towards military intervention. Why? Ask yourself why. When you see this type of coverage, ask yourself why. It's the money. It's the money, right? It's the money that comes from these billionaires, funneled to these billionaires, continuing and perpetuating a cycle of billionaires. That's what it does. Warmongers.
And I think that we also see why it was so hard for presidents in the past to pull out of Afghanistan. They were afraid of exactly this kind of press overreaction. There's no way to surrender, leave, withdraw, whatever you want to call it, in a war without things getting ugly. And I feel there was something Pollyannish about expecting anything different. And it disappoints me that the press is behaving in this way.
Wow. Like, you guys should be ashamed of yourselves. You, CNN, of all people.
And how many people know what she means when she says Pollyannish? I would say not very many young people.
Yeah, what do you break it down for us?
Pollyanna, that's Disney. Remember Pollyanna, the really Pollyanna, I think it was, the really innocent Disney character show movie.
Right. Acting as if anyone has like a straight definition of Pollyanna, and if there's like some sort of a,
I'm looking at Pollyannish. Pollyannish, often written in lowercase as Pollyannish, means unrealistically optimistic. If someone is acting Pollyannish, they are judged as showing an optimism that is extremely naive and unthinking. Pollyannish is based on Pollyanna, a term for an excessively optimistic person. So that was also the name of a Disney movie. I thought she was like using some kind of Disney reference.
No, but that's exactly what Pollyannish means. Yeah, what you said is just this overly optimistic, like everything is great. It's always great.
But Amanda, the role of the press is to challenge the government.
Oh, really? The role of the press is to challenge the government. Oh, really?
Which we never do here.
Is that really what you do? You challenge the government? Really?
Aren't these reporters just doing their jobs, challenging the people in authority, saying, why did this go so badly? Yes, you withdrew, but why was it executed so badly?
I feel like accountability works better if it's in good faith or if it's rooted in something that's factual. I think.
Damn. Damn, girl. Oh, man, she did not. If it's based in something factual. Yeah, and accountability goes both ways.
There's not been accountability for 20 years for staying in Afghanistan.
What? Right. Where's that? Where's that coverage have been? Where's that coverage?
Over and over and over again, presidents have actually been rewarded for the bad decision of staying in Afghanistan by a press that kind of leans towards not ever wanting to see the ugly images of what leaving would look like. So, accountability is good, but what we have is a problem of failure of accountability for about 20 years now.
Ouch.
You know what? It's so funny because generally they'll have like one person that's completely on the right, one that's on the left, and they kind of like argue and they kind of push the other person. But very rare do you have two people that come on and agree on the negative of what CNN is trying to hide. You know what I mean? Like, this is awesome. And, and what's also sad is that this is actually news to us. Like, wow, this is so rare. This never happens.
Right. Like, oh my gosh, this is so rare. I have to do a whole segment on it, on the show today about CNN, like actually had people on the air tell the truth. But Brian's question about, well, isn't this the job of the reporters to push back? He's conflating actual journalism with his network. Let's be clear, right? A reporter who's embedded in Afghanistan and is protected by the U.S. military, right? When you're embedded, you're in bed. You're in bed. Let's be honest. You're there.
That would have been
the military protects you the whole time.
That would have been my question to Brian. If he would have posed that question to me, I'd have been like, yeah, so when are you going to start doing that?
Right. Exactly. When are you going to start actually doing journalism? Because what we're talking about with these reporters, what these two people on his air are talking about isn't about the journalists who are embedded with these soldiers and so forth. Like, that's one piece of it. No, what they're talking about is the 24-hour wall-to-wall news anchor coverage of these fat slobs sitting there on their news anchor desks, getting their big cushy salaries and reporting that this is a disaster and that this should have been better constructed and we should be staying there. And I'm going to have this retired general on my air. And nonstop coverage of how horrible this has been, propaganda, pushing it into our brains that we should be staying there. And good for Biden for not listening to it. Good for Biden for like saying, you know what? Hey, maybe I'm 82. I don't know how old he is. If this is going to be my legacy that I ended this war and I got out of here and it's on my watch, fine. And, we don't know all the machinations of it yet. He may end up just continuing the war just via, drones for the next 20 years, bombing innocent people. We'll see. But for the most part, this whole media conflagration is way overblown and ridiculous. So Matthew goes on.
That's very interesting.
That's interesting.
He's just like so dumbfounded.
Wow,
like, I can't believe you would criticize me.
Towards not ever wanting to see the ugly images of what leaving would look like. So, accountability is good, but what we have is a problem of failure of accountability for about 20 years now.
That's very interesting. Dowd, how does
that? I clearly don't appreciate that talk on my air. I don't like anyone saying bad things about us here at CNN. We always cover war. We're funded by war.
does that ring with you, given your relationship with George W. Bush back in the 2000s?
Well, to me, I've been a critic of Joe Biden on a number of different things, so it's not like I'm some cheerleader of Joe Biden. I'm just trying to look at this from my perspective of this. George W. Bush is the one who should be lambasted the most in this coverage. That's who should be lambasted the most. The original sin of the problem we're seeing unfolding and everything that's happened in 20 years is at his doorstep. Now, Barack Obama should have done something about it.
By the way, Matthew Dowd used to work for Bush. He was an advisor to Bush Cheney, remember?
And that's probably what was their gamble. They're like, this guy worked for Bush. He's going to be all about the war.
Yeah, he's going to say this was a disaster. We should absolutely stick it out and help these people get out of here, et cetera, et cetera. And he goes on and says, Biden got 30,000 people out of there quietly, and no one has died as a result of it. Like America saved and brought out of there during this evacuation. He worked for Bush and Cheney, and he's standing here saying that all of the criticism should be against Bush and Cheney, lobbed right at their feet.
With the American people wanted the troops withdrawn then. He didn't because he was, as was just said by Amanda, he was afraid of exactly what's happening here. I actually agreed with Donald Trump on this when he announced he was going to withdraw from Afghanistan. How he went about it, I disagreed, but I agreed with the idea of getting out of Afghanistan. But I think the press, again, does not cover this with perspective. And the idea, one other thing, Brian, the voices they're putting on the air are all the voices that got it wrong from day one. All of the voices they're having on the air criticizing most.
Look at Brian's face. He's like, I can't.
Oh my gosh,
No.
He's talking about our generals and our war contractors. Shut up.
You mean all the generals and people that we have now on our payroll who are former Bush advisor, former this, former that, former general this, former that, former NATO allied commander, former that. They're all wrong. They're all warmongers, and they all wanted this perpetual war. And we've had them on our air for the past 2 weeks, nonstop, ad nauseum, here at MSNBC, CNN, everywhere else. Really? Watch his face. I just love his face in this. Sorry.
Does not cover this with perspective. And the idea, one other thing, Brian, the voices they're putting on the air are all the voices that got it wrong from day one. All of the voices they're having on the air criticizing, most of them, criticizing Joe Biden are all the ones that got it
It's like Scooby-Doo.
wrong for the last 20 years. Leon Panetta, George W. Bush, he hasn't been on the air, but people around him, all of them got it wrong. So why would we listen to them related to the pullout?
And she's over on the right-hand side just nodding her head with everything that he says. Yep, yep. And Brian's in the middle just like,
Oh, I'm surprised he didn't just give it when he takes this criticism, he just laughs it off like this. You're just full of it.
yeah.
You're cracking me up.
Yeah. Yeah. So sorry to share the truth. Drop me a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Is the mainstream media getting it right? Thanks for subscribing to the channel. You can also become a channel member by going to morninginvest.com/join, where you can stick it to the mainstream media and support independent journalism. We're able to bring you the stories that you won't see on any of the major billionaire-backed networks. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time, everyone.